Let's talk about the copywriter's dilemma. Most copywriters write well enough to serve clients, but they don't run a business well enough to do this for themselves. I'm Justin Hitt with Ad Briefing's Copywriting Tips. And I wrote this up this morning before all my client calls today in case there's a client that's listening to this call. I wrote this up after breakfast. And it's basically the copywriter's dilemma is that most copywriters, including myself, can write well enough to serve their customers. They can do something well enough to serve their customers. But it's very difficult to use that same skill set to grow their own business. And let me tell you why. The skills of being a copywriter or a marketer are different than the skills of doing bookkeeping and managing staff and licensing and making sure your paperwork's straight and all that other stuff. Very often we can package up a set of work and hand it to a client, and the client can go off and use it. We don't need to be there every day as far as developing these things for a client. Now, we can offer advice on how to run a business. We can share what we've done in the past, but the biggest objection that many clients have is that if your copy is so good, why don't you just use it to grow your own business? Even in competing markets, there'll be somebody who teaches copywriting, for example, and they can teach you how to sell copy, how to do the business of copywriting, yet they are not a copywriter. Just like uh, just like the woods golfing guy. Well, that was weird. Just like just like Tiger Woods has a coach. Very often you need a coach to grow the business because the skill set you have is so far superior than all the other skill sets you have, and it's very valuable to customers, but it's not necessarily valuable to you. I don't know what's going on today with my words, but I'm tripping over my words. Let me just get into this list. This list is the copywriter's dilemma. It's how most copywriters write well enough to improve their client's copy with existing lists, but don't necessarily have the remaining skill sets that can help them build a business from scratch. The truth is, there's a big difference between writing copy and running a business. I mentioned that before. There's customer service, there's accounting, there's all kinds of factors that you've got to account for when you're actually running a business. And sometimes it's easier just to contract yourself to somebody who you can write copy for, who has all this other overhead in place. It is a myth that many clients believe is that all they need is a new sales letter. Now, a sales letter can solve a lot of problems, but if you don't have any income and you don't have any product to sell and you don't have any idea what's going on, a magic sales letter is not magic. It's just a better way to organize ideas and to make a persuasive conversation. Number two is there's a higher monetary value in selling the service of copywriting than it is to use it in-house. I have had subscribers, it's so hard to believe, that they look at the copy on Ad Briefing's copywriting tips and they say, look, this is horrible copy. How can you claim to be a copywriter? This is horrible stuff. Yet the copy I've written for clients has helped them make millions of dollars. Now, again, to be fair, I write technical documents, white papers, and then sales copy. I can help write reports and I've ghostwritten for people, but the material I've written for a client has a higher marketing value than me writing that next report for myself. I have piles of reports in draft that I've gotten 5 figures for as a client deliverable. Now, I got to retain the rights to these. Some of these things had to sit on a shelf for 5 years before I could use the rights. But my point being is I've already been paid 4 or 5 figures to do the writing. That same product as a bookstore book or as a special report on my website, in its lifetime won't generate as much money as I generated initially. Now, from time to time, there are products that are good hits and they'll eventually make it out to Amazon. But then when they get on Amazon, I might get 1,000, 2,000, maybe $3,000 a year from these things. But that one book, I package it up, I put it in the mail. This one in particular right here, this one, I I don't think I've sold maybe 5 copies on Amazon, but sending 100 of these to target prospects, hundreds of thousands of dollars in new assignments. And that's just the way it works. Selling the service of copywriting has a much higher value than being a jack of all trades and doing it yourself. Because when you write copy, the client reviews it. You don't have to pay the client to review the copy and give you feedback. If you do that in-house, you got to have your own editors and stuff, or you read it yourself and you have mistakes and you got to fix them all the time. Anyway, there's a higher monetary value of selling your service as a copywriter than there is to use it in-house. Plain and simple. Number three, there are constraints of the client, because we know we all love clients, and sometimes we don't like clients, but most of the time we love them. But they put constraints upon us. That is actually beneficial for our copy. Very often, the client might know intimately the prospect's concerns, frustrations, and that helps us write. Sometimes they have controls, sometimes they have salespeople, but sometimes we know more about that client and we can help introduce them to markets. Either way, that client saying yes or no, having to please that client is so much harder than pleasing yourself. But in copy, that's good because you're more likely to produce a higher quality, better converting piece than something you're like, oh, this looks nice. I used to do this. I used to just scan these and then I'd send them out on the email list because I didn't want to type it up. I got other things to do. I got billable work. I would just scan something like this and send it out to clients. But this doesn't have any way to contact me. If a client got a hold of this and they said, well, this makes sense. This dude, Justin, knows what he's talking about. I'd like to hire Justin. They can't do it because there's no call to action down here. See, but if I read it off on a podcast, I can give you a call to action at the end. And I'm not selling you anything here. I'm just letting you know. If you got any questions, that's the call to action. You go to the website, ask your questions. So again, the constraints of the client make for better writing. It makes for a narrow scope of activity. And because copywriters have a creative element to it, we very often can stray off the path. Number five, same reason. Oh, the same reason that you can't run a business necessarily and do the copy is the same reason the client can run a business and not do the copy. Do you see how that works? Being a copywriter, being a marketer is a specialization that gives you certain abilities far above and beyond what your typical client can do, and that's why they hire you. But they have skills in project management and operating a business, delivering a different type of service that you would never get in a lifetime. And you probably don't want those things. You're good at copywriting. Do the copywriting. Number six of the reasons why there's a copywriter's dilemma about how you can write about stuff, but you can't necessarily do it. And it's because there are different skills for optimizing rather than going from scratch. The very best copywriters can take a stack of swipe files, they can take a stack of controls, and they can just magically transform that into a new test that has a high probability of success. I've had people ask me, if we hire you to optimize our marketing and to organize our back end so that all the integration works, will I get my money back? Well, do you have a good offer? Or is your product in demand? Do you have a large enough list? There's no way I can answer those things unless we know and can see your conversion numbers as well as your profit per sale. And then sometimes I hurt clients' feelings because we start breaking down, and this is what I'll do in a consultation. We'll start breaking down the product, the margins, the splits, the net on the cost of goods, the gross on the cost of goods. And then when they find out they only got $1, and I said, well, how much do you pay yourself? And they said, well, this is a startup. We're not paying ourselves anything. And I said, well, you got to pay at least minimum wage. How much time have you put into this? And it turns out they're not making any money. And even if they had a gangbuster sale, they still wouldn't make any money. That's a specialized skill I have, not to tell people they're not going to make any money, but basically able to do the math. Usually what we do is we try to break even on the first transaction, and then we have an immediate high margin upsell. So in the case of maybe you're a copywriter and you're going to offer a copy review. So you're going to take the customer's draft and you're going to review it and provide feedback. Denny Hatch used to do this. He would tell you what works and what needs improvement. And then that's how it was framed. And then when that comes back, there's a letter with it that explains all the other valuable services that they have. Do you see how this works? We are developing a system in order to break even on the first sale, get a moderate cost per lead, and then on the immediate upsell, we're offering something else, something new. That is a specialized skill that your client doesn't know. It doesn't have. And then if you're running your own business, it's a skill that gets in the way of actually running a business, because when you start looking at the conversions, you get discouraged. You're like, oh my gosh, there's a 4-year break even here. It's just better to go find a client that has money to spend and a problem to solve that you can solve with words that sell. Then after that, you find another client and another client and another client, and then you didn't have to invest the millions of dollars that they put in just getting that business off the ground. Now, there are ways with drop shipping. There are ways with affiliate offers and things like that. But I always found that the dollar transaction of those offers are not high enough in order for you to have the lifestyle that you can have if you're actually writing copy for clients. Now, again, that's why we have the agency model. The agency model is about setting up a system in place where you have a small team, and the small team supports your outcome of having a 5-figure, 6-figure, 7-figure monthly transaction. Now, again, if you're doing 7 figures a month, it's likely you've got overhead, profit margin, software tools to pay for, and your net is not $1 million a month, even if that is your gross. But again, uh, there is this copywriter's dilemma. Let me close with one more thing. Now, you'll notice there's more stuff on my list, but I'm wrapping it up here at the 11-minute mark just to make sure you understand what we've talked about so far, because there is a frustration at times when a prospect says, if this works so well, why couldn't you just do it for yourself? And the fact is, and here's how you handle that objection. The fact is, copywriting and marketing is a specialized skill, and that's the area which I have expertise. Running a business, doing bookkeeping, unlocking the door every morning and locking the storefront up every night, ordering office supplies, that is not your specialty. And ultimately, you're focusing on where your strengths are, and you have a higher value to your clients as a copywriter, just like they have a higher value to their customers doing what it is that they do on a day-to-day basis. Now, the other question that comes up, and it's not an objection, but it's a concern of your prospects, is that they think that your copywriting is going to magically save their life. Like their business is failing, their business is struggling, and that your copy is the one thing that's going to be the difference between where they were and where they want to be. And that's not necessarily the case. Now, if you've got a good mailing list that's active and you write some really good copy and you have a structured campaign of upsells, a structured campaign of interconnections, then yes, copywriting marketing is the best approach you can take. It's not but it doesn't need to be a Hail Mary. If your client comes to you and this is the last dollar they've got, you do not want to work with this client. A lot of clients will say, hey, look, we're going to get this thing fixed, and then when we're making money, would you take equity? Well, maybe you would. Maybe you would, but you're going to make sure that that marketing is in place and that their measures are accurate and that their products are able to be tested and you're able to drill down. I've worked with clients and gotten paid on the transaction. I usually do a percentage of gross, and whether I'm writing the copy or I'm setting up the funnels or I'm setting up the integration, but I get the money up front, and I get it up front in a retainer, which is then paid down through their commissions or through my commission or my royalty. And then that way, if we need to meet 2 or 3 times a week to do something, that's fine. But that's going to be a 5-figure per week opportunity for me and for you. See, that's the thing. I never charge more than the customer is going to get. That's kind of a little tip as a marketer or a copywriter. Don't charge more money than the client's going to put in their pocket. If the client gets $1 more than you do for every transaction, then they will always be happy because it didn't cost them anything. Okay. I include my expenses in their marketing costs. So if they spend $10,000 and they get 1,000 leads, that's $100 per lead. But that 10,000 included what I'm getting paid. I might be getting paid $9,999 out of that $10,000. It's still going towards the cost per sale. It's still going towards the cost per lead. That way, if there is a profit off of that transaction, that customer is getting every dollar of that profit and they are able to be happy about it. Now, I want to grow that so that if they're paying me $9,999 a week, that they're getting $10,000 a week. And then that way everybody's happy for the long run. But that's not always possible. If you got 5 or 6 partners in the deal, they may be splitting that along a larger group. They may have overhead costs that you can't control as a marketer. That's why you never take the net. But ultimately, they're going to grow. You're going to grow. And then hopefully you get them in a position where you can then let them go off and do what they need to do, and they have some good controls that they can keep sending month over month. That you built a showcase book, or I call a results book, that is basically a giant PDF document of what kinds of tests that you've done. It's kind of like a testing observations that gives them an idea of what works and what doesn't, so that you can replicate those activities. A lot of times they'll hire copywriters and they'll go through that book and they'll say, okay, well, I like what you're doing here because this works. I like what you're doing here because that works. And then these things can be improved. And then they get better results out of their copywriters. So I'm Justin Hitt with Ad Briefing's Copywriting Tips, and this has been the Copywriter's Dilemma. Just because you can write good copy doesn't mean that you could be a publisher. Who's got two thumbs and thought he could just start a publishing company, and because he could write copy and he could write a lot, he'd make a lot of money? This guy. But ultimately, you want to focus on your strengths, do a little 80-20 Pareto principle. The key people you're going to add to your team as a marketing agency is going to be your bookkeeper and your personal assistant. That's free money right there, by the way. I know I sell that in my coaching, but if you have a bookkeeper and your books are clean, you can know at the end of the year if you're making any money, or even this month if you're making any money. But finally, the copywriter's dilemma is that if you're really good at writing copy for your clients, that is the highest value activity. And then if you're not, then getting good at making clients for yourself is the highest value activity. Other than that, sweeping the floors, taking out the trash, mowing the grass, all that stuff is part of running a business, but it's not, you can have an agency with just a chair and a desk and a laptop. You don't need to have a building for an agency. And that's how you serve clients. That's how you get results. That's how I was able to create more than $200 million before the 2000 recession. And then from then till now, almost $1 billion in value for clients. Now, again, I'm working for Fortune 100 companies. I'm working for giant publishers. There's as much of them as there are the other. Actually, there's a lot of little clients, but the big clients are big, and so $1 billion is not really that much over a 23-year period, or a little over 2 decades. But anyway, if you've got questions, I'm Justin Hitt. I love to answer your questions. That's what gives me the ideas for these lists. I hope this has been useful to you. Please put it to work. You'll get results. And, instead of trying to run your own thing, make sure you're serving your clients, because there's joint venture opportunities. There's equity deals. There's, building on their successes. And you can have what you're looking for with words that sell. See you in the next podcast.